And those, ladies and gentlemen, are my predictions on this preview for AEW All Out 2021, a week from today. Now, before I go, I know a lot of you are saying, well, Brian, what about Bryan Danielson? Daniel Bryan, he's scheduled to show up at All Out. Is he? Now, we know that the person at bodyslam.net was right about CM Punk, but he was inaccurate about when Punk was going to debut. He said he was going to debut when they were in Chicago, when he was in Chicago, but they didn't say where in Chicago, as far as I know. He didn't say what place in Chicago. He didn't know the United Center would be the place. As far as I'm sure, he didn't know the United Center would be the place. I'm sure he was certain it was going to be either at All Out or it was going to be on the post All Out editions of Dynamite or Rampage, also at the Now Arena. So to me, the guy was right about Punk showing up in the Chicago area for AEW, but I don't think he was correct in when and where he would debut. So as far as Bryan Danielson goes, aka Daniel Bryan, he might be right on the money. He might be right on the money. And and here's the thing, if that is the case, if the Final Countdown starts playing, or some AEW remix of Flight of the Valkyries starts playing, then you need to have that stuff, or that song, that music, that remix, whatever you want to call it, you need to have that start playing after Kenny Omega's match. That's right. You need to have it playing after Omega's match. You know why? Because what you do after Kenny beats Christian and everything, you have Kenny celebrating, his music's playing, but then it gets cut off, and then all of a sudden either the lights go out or you start hearing a new music play that seems familiar. The crowd knows what it is, even if it's a remix or it's the Final Countdown, by Europe, I think that's their name. Here's the thing. You have either the lights go out, that music or remix starts playing, or you have Kenny celebrating and his music cuts off and then that music starts playing and the crowd knows what it is. And then you have Daniel Bryan, aka Bryan Danielson, walk out, and right then and there, you tease. You give us a tease of Daniel Bryan, aka Bryan Danielson, versus Kenny Omega. You don't give it to us yet, but you tease it. You tease it to the point to where, not only is Callis surprised and Omega surprised, but the whole crowd who has an idea he's going to be there, but don't know when he's going to show up. They're surprised, they're happy, and whenever you get the match ready to be, signed, sealed, and deliver, that venue where it's going to be at will be excited as well. And then also you allow maybe Christian to get his comeuppance on Kenny by basically taking the distracted Kenny and hitting the kill switch on him to, end that entire match and segment, post-match segment, end it on a happy note, if you know what I mean. But yeah, if Bryan Danielson shows up at AEW All Out this Sunday, and it's after, depending whether that's true or not, if that's accurate or not, here's the thing. You have him show up, in my opinion, the best way to do it, have him debut after Kenny's match, Kenny's celebrating, and either the lights go out and the remix of Flight of the Valkyries or the Final Countdown starts playing, and then the spotlight goes to the entranceway, and then we see him walk out, and then the lights come up, and then you show maybe Kenny's shocked face, or you see Kenny's shocked face, in the flashing of all the lights, of all the, all the flashes of the cameras going off. And right there, you tease it. You tease it for you tease basically that potential matchup. That's what you do. And then again, you allow Christian to get his comeuppance on Kenny by hitting the kill switch to end, to end that post-match segment off, on a happy note, if you know what I mean. You either do it that way, or you have him celebrating in the ring, like I said, no lights going out or anything, but then you have his music suddenly get stopped, and then, like I said, that remix of Flight of the Valkyries and the Final Countdown plays, out comes Daniel, there you go. You're teasing people with that potential matchup, and you're off to the races. So that's how I would debut Bryan Danielson, aka Daniel Bryan, in AEW this Sunday, if what the person at bodyslam.net said is accurate in what he's heard. But overall, though, those are just my thoughts, predictions and on this AEW All Out 2021 preview. Let me know what your thoughts and predictions are down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, everybody, and I will talk to you all later. And also, when he puts it out, check out Just Alex's and Saw Monsters preview for All Out this Wednesday, because you know it's coming after Dynamite. And I will talk to you all later. So till next time, guys, peace. So one of the fellow fans out there, I should say, called Crystal Maiden 77, who has, well, in her own unique way, not only been very vocal and critical at times about Ian Flynn's writing, but has been the same with someone like Ken Penders and other writers. Basically, she feels that there are some elements and plot holes in stories that just don't make sense. And the one thing she says, improves on that is the fans. The fellow fans, like her. Like with things like Archie Sonic Online, the Mobius Legends, stuff like that. She feels it's a much better improvement when the fans know exactly what to do better than the actual writers. However, recently we've been talking about Ian Flynn and Ken Penders, and how Ken, is at odds with Ian right now because of what's going on, and basically feeling that if Ian really wanted the freedom fighters in the IDW book, that unlike himself, basically Ken feels, what I'm trying to say is, as I've said in other videos, Ken feels that if Ian wanted the freedom fighters in the book, Sally, Acorn, Bunny Rabbit, and all them, that basically, unlike that, like himself, when he previously worked on the Archie book, that Ian would fight for it. That unlike himself, Ian wouldn't be, as he calls him, a snowflake and just let things be. Even though Ian has gone on record in saying he wants to get the characters in there, it seems, as I've mentioned before, and other people have noticed this, he's kind of gone back and forth. Like he says one thing and then he says another. The complete opposite of what he said before. Well, Crystal Maiden 77 decided to do a little bit of a column on her DeviantArt page. What she talked about, basically, she entitled it right there, and you can see the title right there. Yeah, what Ian Flynn and Penders have in common, and that's Ken Penders. And she posted this basically today, I think. She posted this, I think, earlier today, I think. No, no. She posted this, believe it or not, back in December, but for some odd reason it popped up today on my subscription. I don't know if she updated it or what. Yeah, it popped up on on the watchers page on DeviantArt, basically showing you all the new stuff that the people you're watching and subscribe to on DeviantArt have uploaded. Well, this was done back in 2019, so this is obviously an update. In fact, I think she even says it. She said basically it's a while ago when she did this, but yeah, she obviously updated it recently to re-upload it, if you will. But this is what she says, and this is something, like I said, she did originally back in December of 2019, almost 2 years ago this December, a year and a half ago, we would say. But this is what she said, and I quote, as I get myself some Dr. Pepper here while I get ready to read off this. This is 11 pages, guys, so get ready to be in for the long haul there. But this is what she said, and I quote. This is what she said, and I quote, for her article of what Ian Flynn and Penders have in common. This is what she says. First, she starts off by saying, here's possibly why a while ago I started to say Penders, okay, let me reread that. This is what she says, and I quote, here's possibly why a while ago I started to say Penders when I meant to say Flynn, a mistake of mine that I constantly find annoying. Well, something like that. Well, I guess in a way she basically, I guess, sees similarities, to them, because according to this is what they have in common. But again, she must have updated this recently to re-upload it. But this is what she says, and I quote, number one, again, these are what Ian Flynn and Penders have in common. Number one, both writers have a nasty trend of picking the more convoluted and illogical plot explanations and developments as opposed to keeping it simple and going with what you'd expect. With Penders, my easiest example of this is the explanation for how Sonic was framed to have dropped Sally to her death in issue 47. It's none of the explanations I expected, and instead Hershey in a Sonic suit that made her think everyone she saw was snivelly, thought Sally was snivelly, and cut the rope. I thought that was both silly and brilliantly creative at the same time. With Flynn, there's tons of examples of convoluted writing like this that doesn't just keep it simple and logic, like instead of the Robians around Sandblast City becoming legionnaires because Eggman captured them, they willingly went to him because somehow Jack didn't forgive them for being turned into brainwashed robot slaves. Continuing on. And worst of all, Jeffrey doing an evil plot not for King Acorn. Okay. And worst of all, Jeffrey doing an evil plan not for King Acorn against the Council of Acorns, not for himself, in the sense that he just wanted to spite Sonic as his rival. Not for Mammoth Mogul, but for Ixis of all people. After Ixis tried to kill every Robian in Return of the King, and he objected to it. He could have kept it simple by explaining that Jeffrey was brainwashed into this. Like the soldiers, Ixis effortlessly brainwashed, but not even that was the explanation. That would have kept things simple and made sense as opposed to him willingly working for Ixis. Continuing on. And let me put these down one page at a time here. Like I said, it's going to be a while. And I'll provide a link, in the card section, in the annotations above here, and in the description. You guys can check it out. Let me see, what was that? Okay. All right. Okay, I was right here. It says, that would have kept things simple and made sense as opposed to him willingly working for Ixis. The audience is assuming different things would happen in the plot because they make more sense, and then something completely out of left field happens instead. I compared this kind of plot twist to the revelation that Rey's parents don't matter in Star Wars when everyone theorized about who they were, instead of making him a villain with motives that make sense. He created a whopping 16 continuity errors in a row by pretending he was always working for Ixis the whole time. I could have forgiven him working for Ixis completely if he was just using him so he could become a better mage for the heroes. But it wasn't just a recent thing, and it was so convoluted that he dedicated an entire issue to explaining how he was retconning him to have always been on Ixis' side to pretend it totally makes sense. Look, I'll have Jeffrey explain it to you. And they kind of, I guess they had some imagery, something like that originally, like panels from that issue. But continuing on, they say this, number 2. It's kind of ironic that when Penders turned a character green, everyone hated it. But when Flynn did the exact same thing, and it was permanent, everyone loved it. But it looks good for Scourge, and bad for Knuckles. So I get that. But this concept is so ironic But this concept is ironic of both of them. And even before Green Knuckles, Dimitri became green in his first appearance from the emeralds in the chamber exploding on him. So he absorbed the powers just like Scourge did with the Master Emerald. So it's Penders' idea, not Flynn's. He didn't really come up with the idea on his own. Just the idea of applying the old idea to a character he didn't even own either. So basically explaining that here, at times, Flynn just copies and pastes certain things, to fit his own ideas and all that, if you will. Also, Carl Bowlers, had Echo Sonic as a wasted concept, and that was literally Sonic turned green from chaos energy. Even if for one panel, so that's another way Scourge wasn't original. And a third way is that Fleetway had not only a little evil Sonic from another universe who was a king, but also Metamorphify became a green Sonic that challenged Sonic to a race. Yeah, so basically what they're getting at is that, Ken, from what they can understand so far, is doing, does a better job at certain things, explaining certain things and all that, then, even if it's silly and all that, it's creative compared to what Ian has been doing in her eyes, or from her point of view. Number 3, both of them had their debut stories involve Scourge the Hedgehog. Flynn even made the character his own by making him green with a new name, as if he was introducing him for the first time. Number 4, both of them had major impacts on the situation of the echidnas. We all know Penders' identity by now, but with Flynn, the Jack Knuckles arc single-handedly destroyed Echidnaopolis unnecessarily, and set all the echidnas to Avalon equally unnecessary, and then echidnas were made rare by an impossible destructive genocide of Avalon out of nowhere for no reason. It was strange of the Archie Sonic comic to do that to such a famous part of its identity, but meta logic, that's how it was in the video games. Number 5, both had tons of dangling plot threads. Flynn left over 60 dangling by the time the reboot happened, most of which dated back so far that it was obvious they were never going to be resolved. Like the other cons nonsense. Flynn resolved 22 plot threads by previous writers. I guess I didn't get all of it. I thought I printed all of it out. Must have been when the thing didn't go all the way. That's weird. Previous writers. Again, I guess it didn't go all the way. Here again, I'll provide a link down below, but you kind of get what she's getting at here. Continuing on to number 6, as best as we can here. Both had at least one overly long, dragged-out, infamous story arc that they're famous for. Mecha Sally arc and Chaos Knuckles arc, both of which had dark elements because the former is self-explanatory and the latter had Knuckles withering in pain for no good reason and fighting Tails for no good reason, just for padding. Number 7. Both had over 894 plot holes. Number 8. Both had around 190 separate stories in the pre-reboot, 191 to Penders, 191 to Penders' 196. Basically, Ian had 191 separate stories, Penders had 196. These similar numbers are quite a coincidence. Number 9. To me, anyway, both are bad writers. It's just that Flynn had the direction be the worst part and distracted the audience from the illogical writing with game references, while Penders had the stories usually be illogical, but the direction wasn't dark or edgy and had happy results in universe. You can't tell me Knuckles wasn't happy to get his people back. Game Knuckles would have killed for that. There are two sides of the same coin, and they contrast each other, but usually they're more similar. I find that fascinating considering the totally opposite fan reception. Both of them have consistently sloppy, illogical, and confusing writing for their stories, often picking the more convoluted and illogical plot explanations and developments as opposed to keeping it simple and going with what you'd expect. And I noticed his sloppy writing in the first issue he wrote. The only thing dark that I can remember about Penders' writing, right aside from the, okay, never mind, I got ahead of myself, sorry about that. Got ahead of myself here. Number 10, sorry about that. Trying to read where I was at. Number 10, both were accused of being dark and edgy at times. Have you read Flynn's Other M comic? You need to read it, at least for history's sake. Gore is so common there that I got used to averting my eyes from it. And at least Penders had that be extremely rare. I say Flynn has way more drama for the shock value, honestly, with the Mecha Sally arc, which was forced drama incarnate, and Fiona's arbitrary betrayal with Scourge, and Jeffrey being turned into betrayal for no reason. Now, going while I was reading getting ahead of myself, if you will. The only thing dark that I can remember about Penders' writing, right aside from the nuke in Echidna history, but that never killed anybody, was that Knuckles was withering in pain when he was green. Usually it was lighthearted, especially the Knuckles comic. So much so that there's a reason I kept forgetting that nuke ever happened. I laughed a ton from the Knuckles comic. I laughed a ton from the Knuckles comics' charming jokes and scenes, and there were barely any cheeriness in the Mecha Sally arc. Again, I'll provide a link down below so you guys can read it. Number 11. Both made spelling errors in types and stories. Flynn had Domalus' order of Isis appreciated, aided, and others. And Penders had stuff like word acquired and this other stuff in the case C. Yeah, I must have not printed it all. That's weird. It's supposed to print everything. Okay. So, again, I'll provide a link down below for you guys can check this out yourself. But I guess it makes it a little easier. Whew! She went through a lot here, baby. Alright, part of number 12 is this. Existence one time, and apparently he turned good in Silver's future just because it was the future. Not to mention that even before that, according to Flynn, he gave Mina and Mighty magical powers for no reason out of the kindness of his heart. Oh, right, he also marked them so he could brainwash them later. But what took him so long? It was still awfully kind of him to wait that long to brainwash them. They could have been with the destructive ever since as his brainwashed slaves. And he's talking, and obviously what Crystal's talking about is Mammoth Mogul and the issue where out of nowhere we find out that he marked Tails, Mighty, and Mina, to do what he says when the time was right. Continuing on, and I quote, Penders also started the redemption for Dimitri. He said he had a lot he was accountable for, and was clearly contrasted by Mogul, who said he had grown a conscience as an insult. Flynn continued him on that trail. 13. Both are famous Sonic writers, probably the two most famous. I'm really shocked that the number for this list is so high. I didn't think I'd get more than a few points on this list. I wasn't serious about making an entire list, but wow. Number 16. Both had a character in coma. Sally, Hawken, and King Max for Penders, Antoine for Flynn, in a world where magic and technology should have easily woken them up with wish-granting rings, or nanobots, or stasis tubes, etc. Number 15. Both had Locke die in a completely stupid, convoluted way that made no sense at all out of nowhere. Number 16. Both had a character arbitrarily die purely because it was based off personal real-life experience with their own family dying. Locke's death originally was based off Penders' father's tragic death to cancer. Well, Flynn killed off Antoine's father because I think it was his grandmother who died. But both times it made no sense in universe in a world with do anything magic and technology. So it wasn't fair to the characters to kill them off, so easily just because of meta logic. Continuing on. Both him and Penders ended a game adaptation with you being told to play the game to find out the rest of the story. Bolas did that with Sonic Adventure 2. Penders did that with Sonic Shuffle, so that the whole story was just exposition leading to nothing, and now we have the writer's adaptation and Rush Adventure, Colors and Generations. It doesn't count as an adaptation if it's just adapting the first cutscene at worst, or it being an original story with barely anything happening and no proper resolution at best. And with the writer's adaptation, it makes the least amount of sense because now the plot is that the Babylon rogues were employed by Eggman to destroy Naho, but that wasn't the case at all in Sonic Riders, so we'll never know how this arc ended. Woo! 19. Well, we got 18 here. Let's see. Again, I'll provide a link so you guys can read the entire thing. Apparently when I printed it out, it didn't want to print the entire thing for some reason. They cut off some parts of the pages. Let's see here, let's see what they talk about here on 18. Oh, they just talk about like Penders and Flynn giving like extra powers and all that. So skipping ahead to 19, because again I do apologize for this. Like I said, the printer cut them off for some reason. Moving on to 19. They both had realistic guns in a Sonic comic. Penders had it with Knuckles 13's arc, and Flynn had it as early as issue 165 with Sleuth threatening Tails at gunpoint. Plus, Jack had a gun. We've seen cartoonish ray guns in the comic before. It could have been that instead. Number 20. Both have council governments as concepts. But when Penders did it, having a high council for the echidnas, I don't hate them. Because they weren't obstructing the heroes, dragging down the pacing. They were completely out of focus as they should be. They were harmless, and it wasn't like previous established characters were derailed to become part of the council and therefore become less likable. Number 21. And I'm going to have to skip 22 because it's cut off too for some reason. Number 21. Both writers have established characters go work in a group they aren't truly qualified for purely because of characters we already know. Penders had that happen with Jeffrey's elite Secret Service agents because only Vandals, Heavy, and Bomb looked like they'd be competent heroes due to the special abilities to offer. The rest were just there because we knew them already, like Hershey and Wombat Stew. And Flynn repeated that mistake even worse with the Council of Acorn. which should have just been a mostly off-screen government of people we don't know. Excuse me, like how Penders handled the High Council of Echidnaopolis, who never ordered around a hero once. Continuing on, and again I got to skip 22 because it skipped it, because it cut it off for some reason. Number 23. Penders wrote Scourge and Rouge getting to the Master Emerald with Archie not being there to warp Rouge away. Okay, let me read that. Penders wrote Scourge and Rouge getting to the Emerald with Archie not being there to warp Rouge away, this time when he just did the last issue. Flynn made the same mistake again in issue 160. Both times they got alone with the Master Emerald way too easily. Number 24. In Free Comic Book Day issue 1, Sally told Knuckles he nearly took Sonic's head off in this... Oh, okay. In number 24. In Free Comic Book Day issue 1, Sally told Knuckles he nearly took Sonic's head off. In the start of Penders In Your Face special, Sonic said to Sally, "I almost took your head off." Isn't that dark for Sonic? I don't like that being referenced. Number 25. They both wrote characters becoming omnipotent just not to do the obvious smart thing and kill all their enemies. Irrijack didn't kill Knuckles or brainwash him like the Chaotix, and Chaos Knuckles didn't immediately take down Brainwash to be good all of the major villains, and took forever to think to save Echidnaopolis himself. Then Flynn wrote Irrijack Knuckles, who was too stupid to just immediately go to Eggman after he was done with the enemies on... okay, let me reread that. And then Flynn wrote Irrijack Knuckles, who was too stupid to just immediately go to Eggman after he was done with the enemies of his on Angel Island, and instead he sent to his friend's city for some reason because plot. Logically, he should have killed Eggman there, but somehow he didn't, and just settled for destroying his egg fleet. 26. Both writers had Sally... Okay, number 26. Both writers had Sally having a struggling OOC out of character moment when she showed a... Okay. Number 26. Both writers had Sally having a struggling OOC moment when she showed a pungent shoot the dog side. Because while Flynn had Sally opposed to saving Irrijack Knuckles from the egg grapes, not even considering that he could have snapped out of it, Penders had Sally say she might have ordered the dismantling of the Robians too if she knew that Eggman was going to brainwash them. Number 27. Okay, hold on, let me catch my breather here, guys. Like I said, it's a long one. Okay, continuing on, and I quote, number 27. You would think that only Penders would write a character like the Hunter who hunted Mobians like a psychopath. You'd be wrong. Read Flynn's other M comic. Kodos was in charge of the Guardians holdings within the former Kingdom of Acorn, and after a few years he went feral and started having hunts of fellow Mobians like game animals, like the Hunter that Penders wrote. In fact, we actually learned that Kodos killed tons of people in a panel a bit after he did it, unlike with the Hunter, and his face was stained from it. That other M comic has Echidnaopolis ruled by the Dark Legion as the main setting, and the villainous team Penders' ideas with Knuckles as the pure evil leader of the city, with a Chaotix as his soldier and raising an evil Tails, also Penders' idea, though he's way eviler than Miles. On the bright side, the heroes are portrayed as kind of the bad guys for targeting innocent civilians, rather than it being portrayed as good that they're bullying the echidnas as, and it ends there, basically. Again, you have to read, I have to provide the link in the annotations as well as in the description, so you guys can check it out for yourself, if you will. Alright, and what number was that off of? That was off 27, so we're on to 28. Well, I guess we can finish off a little bit of 27. It says, the point is, rather than being completely original with new villains, Flynn took Penders' idea of Kidnapolis and the Legion to write a fan comic, which you'd expect Penders to do with the Echidna focus. Other M is the Knuckles comic, but in a separate dimension, where Sonic and the Freedom Fighters fight against an evil Knuckles. And it's bleak and grim for the most part, while the Knuckles comic is lighthearted and humorous. Number 28. Both writers had Snively get left alone in Eggman's base with Robotnik gone instead of arrested, like he logically should have been. There was no reason for Sonic not to beat him up and imprison him. With Penders, it happened after Eve supposedly vaporized Robotnik. And in issue 200, it's even worse because they don't arrest Eggman either when that was the entire reason they came there. And again, her point of view, her opinion. Number 29. And again, as you can, we have some long ones here, baby. Woo! I don't know. I think we got a few more pages to go here. Yeah, but some of these are long, so I do apologize. Number 29. The Super Genesis Wave is basically just Flynn's ultimate annihilator, having tons of weird side effects that have nothing to do with one thing it was originally programmed for. What about a laser being fired at Sonic's Chaos Control Spear, remaking the universe, would have caused Sonic, Eggman, and Blaze to keep their worlds collide memories, and brought Amy, Bean, Bark, and Cream to the Soul Dimension where they weren't born there, and made the tremors and fissures in the Earth to make an unleashed adaptation. This all happening from an unintended glitchy side effects is just as confusing as the Ultimate Annihilator, restoring the free will of Robians in one city, weakening the barriers between all the zones so that Echidnapolis returns to the island, and sending Knothole into a dimension 3 hours ahead of the rest of space, time and space. Number 30. Both writers humiliated Ixis with a really easy anticlimactic victory over him. Penders had him get wished away by a ring after merely creating a blizzard against Sonic. Flynn had him be knocked out in one backwards punch by Bunny, and he did much more to humiliate him with the sickness he got from the Genesis Wave. He had to get carried away from danger by Big the Cat, and while I was excited to see him again in the reboot, he just ran away from the city like a coward just because he was scared by the memories of Prime Ixis' life, all while not having his powers anymore. Even in the reboot, he's lame. Number 31. Both writers had the concept of a villain taking over Sonic's life wasted by only lasting the length of one story. Penders did it in 150 to 151, and because those issues had two stories each, if you combine the main stories together, the main story with Sonic being impersonated was only one full issue long. And in Sonic X, Flynn had Eggman take over Sonic's body, and it was completely wasted because it was just one issue, and he spent most of the time running into walls, even though he should have had Sonic's reaction times if he had his super speed too. Just checking the time on there. Okay. Well, the battery life on it. Number 32, if it's all there, but I don't know. Yeah, it might be. I don't know. Number 32. When I first saw the thumbnail of a video about Mobius 30 years later, I thought, okay, can't finish that one. Again, I'll provide the link. So we'll go to number 33. Again, I don't know why I didn't print it all out at once, so it's kind of weird. And we're almost done here, folks, so I do apologize. Number 33. Remembering when Flynn made... Oh, okay, number 33. Remember when Flynn made King Max a depressing, clearly old man who sits silently in a wheelchair? Which wasn't how he was in the future? Well, Penders did that to Saber, Knuckles' grandpa, in 25 years later. So that was a Penders idea. I hated that because not only was it a depressing disservice to Saber's character, but it came out of nowhere because we're seeing him and Knuckles surrounded by guardians who are older than both of them, and yet only Saber's noticeably old. Suddenly he's portrayed like he's 90, or 80, I should, no, not, what is it? Yeah, 90, just because he's Knuckles' grandpa, and it's the future when the other guardians still seem like they're fine. Number 34. Both are accused of being biased writers. I was consistently exasperated by Penders' Christianity references in the Sonic comic. It was very out of place, and yet he insisted on having them there for the echidnas. Like literally a line has a character say, "the humblest of God's creatures." Also, fans accused Penders of being biased as favor of Knuckles. Oh, okay. Also, fans have accused Penders of being biased in favor of Knuckles, even though he had idiotic moments perfectly fine, and had every reason to want to fill in the plot hole Sonic 3 left behind. Where it was Knuckles, where it said Knuckles was the last echidna, with no explanation of how Knuckles is still around. I still can't blame him for being excited to fill in the obvious mystery with explaining what happened to the echidnas. Sure, he was most interested in writing the echidnas, but it's not objectively evil and biased. That's just what he was interested in as one of the writers, so no big deal. And Frank Storm was more interested in writing about Monkey Kong. But with Flynn, it could be far worse than that. If you belong to a forum for SatAM, you're forbidden from joining Flynn's forum. You'd think he'd have the common sense not to do that, since it'd be begging for bad PR, being that obviously biased. It's unprofessional, and that kind of petty decision by an official Sonic writer honestly creeps me out. I mentioned that, okay, let me read that a little bit better. Let me get some light. I thought I'd need some light again. Maybe. Here we go. That's a little better. That's a little better, guys. Okay. Let's see. Alright, here it is. I mentioned that as an easy way of proving my point that he was biased against the American canon to begin with. This is why he destroyed Naho and crippled the Freedom Fighters team in the Mecha Sally arc, making every single SatAM fighter or Freedom Fighter suffer horribly that wasn't a game character. It's all part of his agenda. If he's not biased against them, why didn't he make Tails and Amy suffer just as much as the roboticized Sally? Comatose Antoine, suicidal hated Nicole, dispowered Bunny, and back-injured Rotor. Yeah, that comes off more like a hate-fuel fan fiction by a game purist against Archie Sonic than something canon. A hate-fuel, that absolutely worst-case scenario you'd get when you're hiring a fan fiction writer. Everything unique and original about it was stripped away to try to make it more like the games than the comic book it was. Seriously, how can you read the end of the Freedom Fighters arc, whose names speak for itself, and not think the writing was spiteful, when it was literally almost all the SatAM characters being put through hell at the same time? That's not suspicious? Issue 230, Sally's roboticization. Issue 231, Bunny lost her cyborg parts. Issue 234, Antron got half his face blown off and put in a coma. Issue 235, Nicole is banished after a long time of being hated by most of the city, and Bunny runs away. Penders, okay, let me see if this is complete here. If not, then I'll try my best to fill in the gaps or do something. It says here, Penders never went out of his way to incapacitate, kill, and cripple so many beloved main characters, nor did he permanently destroy major settings. I think I take Penders' biased, and it ends right there. But I think what she's saying there is she'd rather take Penders' writing over Ian Flynn's writing based on how she feels Ian wasn't really a fan of the freedom fighters to begin with. Now, continuing on, I think, let me make sure. Yep. And continue on here. Fiona, Tommy, and Snively were taken out of the freedom fighters just because they weren't in the games. And the setting out freedom fighters were only in the reboot because they were grandfathered in from the pre-boot. And he had the gall to lie to his fans that he fought for them to stay, only to make fun of the people wanting them in the IDW comic in a video or something with Tracy having some snarky comments too. Did Penders ever lie to the fans? Seriously, I want a genuine list because there's no evidence I know of, and this is not making Flynn look better. This honestly creeps me out. He's also accused of being biased in favor of Amy. The evidence for this is that he made Amy the main leader in IDW to the point where she'd be compared to Sally since the start. And when he was asked about where Amy was in 25 years later, he said time traveling with the time stones being awesome, which struck me as a Mary Sue fanfiction plot idea over glorifying her with its confusingness. I just don't understand why he would favorize Amy after Sonic X, Sonic Rush, Black Knight, Generations, etc. I never really got that she was being shown, I never really got that she was being shown parental treatment until I was told this evidence, because all I saw was that the minute he was hired for Archie, he turned her into a fangirl, totally infatuated with Sonic and obsessed with impressing him in issue 172, when before him, she had just been a normal girl with no mention of a crush on Sonic for a very long time. She came off written more like how a fanfiction writer would write Amy out of spite for hating her worst canon portrayals. He seemed more like he hated her if he likes her. Why does he turn her into a completely different person by making her like Sally? That's how I write a few characters I'm frustrated with the portrayal of. Supposedly, he had saw Amy moments in the Mecha Sally arc. I never saw that ever, and just saw some mild friendship moments, if anything, and moved on. Again, I'll provide a link in the annotations as well as in the description. You guys can check it out there. Checking the time here. Okay. I may have to switch batteries here soon, guys. Hold on. Okay. Number 35. And hopefully we're almost done here, because this is a long run. I do apologize. Number 35. Both are bad with keeping the continuity straight. 45 out of 86 of the per Flynn continuity mistakes are by Penders. And until Nate was introduced, he was almost the only one making continuity errors. It was only after Nate that other writers started constantly making mistakes to make up for lost time, like Bowlers, Romney, and eventually Gallagher. 45 is nothing compared to Flynn's 180 continuity errors, though, but he's still the one writer who was the worst with continuity until Flynn. So that's another thing they have in common. Flynn has more continuity mistakes and retcons than every writer combined, or than every other writer combined, with like 200 of them put together. Number 36. Both writers killed off Knuckles. Flynn did it twice, and in his other M comic, an evil Knuckles dictator was stabbed in the chest by Sally on screen, and in his fan fiction, Big Trouble Little Planet, Knuckles was killed by a beam of energy with no foreshadowing, along with Tails, Tikal, Big, and even Sonic and Eggman. Amy undid it with time travel, though, being the only one to get spared. But this isn't the only time he used the concept of time travel to get away with killing off the main cast of characters if he could, as other M can attest. When he had the alternate universe versions of Antoine, Rotor, Constable, Remington, Bunny, Fiona, too many of them to count, were killed, most of them off screen. Speaking as a writer, you have to really hate a character to want to kill them off twice, let alone once. Number 37, Flynn revealed there was another colony of Black Arms still alive as an excuse to bring Shadow's surprised... okay, have to change that up a little bit. But he's talking about, the Black Arms being in the book and Shadow, being focused on that and everything. So I have to, again, provide the link in the annotations and all that so you guys can check it out. And I will be back right in a little bit. I have to change the battery on this. Be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I had to change the battery on it, if you will. But yeah, he just talks about, like in this first part, he talks about, basically the Black Arms and everything, and creativity with Flynn when it came to that, and the creativity compared with Penders and stuff. So, yeah, he basically wrote that in. So we're going to skip that part because, again, for some reason the printer didn't want to print it all out. And we're going to go to 38 here, and again, I'll provide a link in the annotation as well as in the description. You guys can check it out there. Number 38. Number 38, and I think we're getting close to the end here, guys. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is like the last one, so I do apologize. Number 38. Penders' work is known for establishing the Mobians and humans who were racist. Okay, let me reread that. Number 38. Penders' work is known for establishing that Mobians and humans were racist against each other, and that was dismissed by fans. He also has dingoes and echidnas be racist against each other, and the dingoes are disadvantaged minorities when they have to live in Echidnaopolis. Meanwhile, Flynn's other M comic has the racism against dingoes be so bad that eventually any dingo who doesn't buy an expensive worker's patch and wear it gets shot, on sight. And we see a dingo get beaten up on the streets by some echidna kids saying they're carrying out martial law. Also in the past, an echidna and Predator Hawk's father owning a company equally together is considered a big deal. And it turns out things are pretty bad for non-echidnas in Echidnaopolis. Even Penders didn't have to be that bad. Flynn's not above having characters be racist in his works either. The people of Meropis in the reboot are racist against anyone who's not from Meropis. We see the civilians glaring at Sonic and his friends, and that's the worst it's ever been since Nate was mistreated for being a human. Because Sonic is the main character, and these heroes are supposed to be liked main characters, and even they become the victims of racism. Also, I want to give at least honorary mentions to the fact that he used an underwater city at all, which immediately reminded me of Atlantopolis, and the fact that he used the concept of the multi-universe and heroes having to go through a bunch of portals to recruit a ton of heroes for fighting an interdimensional threat to In-World Unite, which reminded me of Night of a Thousand Sonics, but I didn't count that because Atlantopolis was based on Atlantis, so it's not fully Penders' idea, and being underwater in a city is all Meropolis has in common with it. And tons of comics have the multi-universe and portals and heroes being recruited from other universes, not just Penders. And let's see, 39, I think we're almost at the end here. 39, Penders originally wanted Sally killed off from that fall in the Endgame arc, and Sega intervened and said no. Flynn actually killed Sally off with a laser to the head in the Other M webcomic. And then he mentions about Sonic characters killed, and other Sonic characters killed off, like nearly all the main ones in Big Trouble Little Planet, and a bunch of alternate universe Sally M and Archie Freedom Fighters were killed in Other M, and some were even killed off screen. But it was undone with time travel right away. Penders at least had a justification for wanting to kill off Sally, because he figured the king coming back would make her redundant, and I did point out in my reviews that the king usurped Sally's authority and left her with nothing, even if she still had value as a person, but I don't know what Flynn's excuse was. He killed her off in the Other M comic for no reason. Evil Tales could have simply talked to her and politely asked her for the sword to put in the Master Emerald and tricked her. Okay, I guess she would have been fooled. Maybe her psychic master had warned her about him, but we could have seen him try to trick her and fail, and then he could have simply hit her in the chest and sent her falling over. But he didn't have to be written to outright kill her, and Sonic time traveled 2 issues later to save all of his friends, but he was never written to save Sally because he never knew what happened to her. How inconvenient. And Flynn had no reason to vaporize Sally right before the Genesis arc. Penders at least had an excuse. I guess Sally was killed in Other M because she did everything she was intended to do, but why get rid of a character just because they outlived their usefulness? That really seemed like she was considered expendable. And that, that, my friends, was 11 pages that I'm going to shred very soon. Over 50 minutes so far in this. But yeah, what Crystal Maiden's getting at is she would, as a fan herself, she notices that both Flynn and Penders have a lot in common. Mostly the big thing that they have in common is they constantly make mistakes, continuity errors. They leave plot holes, opened that they don't decide to fill in. However, she says the difference, though, between the two is that Flynn leaves more of that plot holeness open than Ken Penders does. That Ken Penders, despite how many plot holes he would do, how many things he would do that didn't make sense, or sounded silly, or may have been dark, that at least he followed through on it. At least he found a way to conclude it as best he could. Or at least try to make sense of it. And when compared to Flynn, she just doesn't see that. What she sees, as she points out in this essay, again I'll provide a link in the Notions and the description so you guys can read it yourself. What she describes here is that Flynn, Flynn is just a fanfic writer working on a comic that just got lucky to write on a comic. That's what she sees. Now she does, even though it's few and in between, she does point out that there are some good things that he did in the comic. That is true. And again, you'll see that when you read it yourself. But when she compares the two, you know, and everything they have in common, she does, like I say, see that Penders is more experienced in writing a comic like Sonic than Flynn is. Now this is true since Penders does have experience as a comic book writer. He's wrote for the Star Trek comics, he's wrote for comics for DC and Marvel. You know, he's run the gambit, you know, while he was also working on Sonic and even before and after. But the thing is, she looks at the fact, and when she compares the two, even though they have similarities, they base that Penders shows less error in what he wrote compared to Ian Flynn. And as I was trying to say, you know, what she sees from her point of view is just somebody that's still a fanfic writer that, as I mentioned, got lucky in becoming an official comic book writer for the Sonic comics, both in Archie and IDW. That even though he's been officially a head writer for not just the Sonic comics, but for other comics like TMNT, MLP, you know, ROM, Transformers, and even stuff outside of IDW for DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, you name it. You know, even though Ian Flynn has 15 plus years of that under his belt now, she still looks at somebody that when he comes back to something like this, or with any other comic he works on, still will write like he's a fan fiction writer, like he's still a fan writing out their own fan fiction to upload onto DeviantArt, to upload onto fanfiction.net, to upload on to writers.com or writing.com. You know, that's what she sees. She doesn't see somebody that is trying to be a true professional comic book writer, even if it's for a Sonic comic book. What she sees is somebody that still views himself as a fan fiction writer that, as I mentioned, is going to post this stuff on all these sites like DeviantArt, fanfiction.net, writing.com, you name it. But like a lot of us as fans, Crystal Maiden 77 has her opinions. And even back then, in 2019, in this updated thing that she uploaded recently, she has a great opinion. She has some great opinions. I'm not going to deny that. She's very opinionated. You watch her reviews on issues of the Archie book and the IDW book, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But she's definitely very opinionated. And if I'm you guys, I check those videos out, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, to dedicate almost 11 pages, 11 to 12 pages, maybe even, I'll put it this way, to dedicate in total 11 to 13 pages, if you will, on DeviantArt, you know, pointing out basically 40, or listing off 40 common traits that they both have, Penders and Flynn, between each other, with some differences. That shows you dedication from a Sonic fan that feels that the comic could be done better, or could have been done better, had Flynn and Penders not made the errors that they did, not left the plot holes that they did, not did this, not did that. You know, you got somebody here that is willing to say, look, if you guys would have just done this and made sense of it, it would have been, you wouldn't hear people complaining. Or if you would, or for someone like Flynn, it's like if you wouldn't copy and paste something to try to make it your own, maybe people wouldn't complain. Or if you wouldn't make decisions to do this, and go with that, nobody would complain. So yeah, very opinionated, and obviously by doing this, shows how dedicated of a Sonic fan she is in her own right. And I definitely suggest checking this out when I provide the link in the annotation and the description as well. And so also check out Crystal Maiden 77's YouTube channel to see her reviews under the newbie's perspective of the Archie and the IDW books. So that's all I'm going to say, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Sorry it took this long to do this. I told you it was going to be that way. So hopefully you guys will be grabbing some So hopefully you guys took a break, grabbed some popcorn, grabbed some sodas, and enjoyed this as best they could. Again, Ananocean will be above and in the description. Well, basically the link in the Ananocean and the description. And that's all I'm going to say, guys, for now. So till then, till next time, take care. God bless. Like the video, comment down below, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. And I'm out.